Thank you for that. Can everybody hear me good? Reggie, give me a thumbs up if you can. Okay, good. So I have my screen shared here. So yeah, today we're talking about fatigue after traumatic brain injury. Like Reggie said, my name is Miranda Gendreau. I'm a speech language pathologist and brain injury specialist. Like she said, my background is primarily hospital based. So the majority of my career has been spent in acute care, inpatient rehab. But I do own my own private practice called Pacific Northwest Brain Rehab, where I work with adults with acquired brain injuries, including like strokes, traumatic brain injuries. So yeah, I'm happy to be here and share on the topic of fatigue. All right. So today, this is kind of the agenda that we're going to go through. We're going to talk about what is fatigue, the symptoms of fatigue, different types of fatigue, how common fatigue is after TBI, what the causes of fatigue are, how fatigue is different in someone with a brain injury versus somebody without a brain injury, and then strategies to help manage fatigue. And if there's time at the end, we'll take some questions. Okay, so what is fatigue? Fatigue is often described as a car running out of fuel or like a curtain coming down at the end of a play. It's an overwhelming sense of tiredness, lack of energy, and exhaustion that affects physical and mental functioning. It is a subjective phenomenon, which means that it's difficult to measure, kind of like pain. We can't test for it. There are several different symptoms of fatigue, which include low energy, decreased motivation, apathy or indifference, feeling sluggish or lethargic, persistent tiredness or exhaustion, as well as difficulty remaining awake during the day, difficulty concentrating or focusing, whole body tiredness, muscle weakness or soreness, irritability or mood swings, and confusion or forgetfulness. There's three different types of fatigue. So physical fatigue, mental, or sometimes referred to as cognitive fatigue, and emotional or psychological fatigue. So we're going to go through each of these. So physical fatigue is commonly associated with muscle weakness. It typically worsens throughout the day and improves after a good night's sleep. This type of fatigue will usually lessen as the individual gets stronger and becomes more active. Mental fatigue is associated with the constant effort that is required to compensate for slowed information processing and attention impairments after TBI. It typically worsens throughout the day and with activities that require a lot of mental effort or focus. And it usually improves after some rest or after a good night's sleep. And it typically improves over time as your cognitive endurance improves. And then we have emotional fatigue. So emotional fatigue is usually associated with depression or anxiety, PTSD as well. It typically worsens with stress, and it's not improved with sleep or rest. It's typically present all the time, but most significantly, it's at its worst when you wake up in the morning. All right, so now we're going to talk about how common fatigue is. So it's very common. It's one of the most common problems that people report after TBI. So across all brain injury severity levels, mild, moderate, and severe brain injuries, between 32 and 73% of people report fatigue. So it's very common. Okay, so what causes fatigue? The underlying causes of fatigue are still poorly understood. So in other words, um, we don't know. So we don't know exactly what causes fatigue. However, there are many strong theories, which are broken up into primary causes and secondary causes. So we'll kind of go over each of those. All right, so primary fatigue is fatigue that is a direct consequence of the brain injury. Whereas secondary fatigue is fatigue that develops as a result or a complication of the sequelae or after effects of the TBI. So examples of primary fatigue, neuroendocrine abnormalities such as like growth hormone deficiency, which is common. It's a common endocrine dysfunction that can occur after TBI, particularly in the chronic phase. Some studies have documented the presence of GHD, which is that growth hormone deficiency, in as many as 60% of cases. Another example of a primary fatigue is disruptions in neurotransmitter systems. So, such as low levels of CSF hypocretin, which is a wake promoting transmitter. So, a decline in hypocretin levels may be associated with increased daytime sleepiness. And then another theory is just the impaired neural efficiency, which is due to neuronal injury occurring diffusely in the brain centers that control arousal, attention, and response speed. So, research has shown a link between impairments of attention and processing speed and levels of fatigue. And an interesting study showed that in a functional MRI, it showed that individuals with TBI exhibit greater activation in the prefrontal cortex during simple cognitive tasks, which suggests that the brain is working harder than it normally does. Okay, and then the last one is altered sleep-wake cycles. So researchers have found that individuals with TBI have lower levels of evening melatonin production. Melatonin is what makes us feel tired. And this suggests that there's a possibility of some disruption of the circadian regulation of melatonin synthesis. So those are our theories of what primary reasons there are for fatigue. And then we'll talk about some examples of secondary fatigue. So these are the things that occur as a result of not a direct consequence of the injury, but of the side effects basically of the injury. So depression, which is linked to increased fatigue, as individuals often experience low motivation, decreased activity levels, and excessive mental burden after TBI. Anxiety also contributes to fatigue by causing some hyperarousal, making it difficult to relax and leading to excessive energy expenditure on worry and stress. So we also see this with our PTSD folks. Pain is another one. So the body expends additional energy trying to manage and cope with pain, leading to heightened physical and mental fatigue. And then sleep disturbances, like we just talked about, but there's insomnia usually and fragmented sleep. So people not being able to fall asleep or get good sleep, like they can't stay asleep. 30 to 80% of people report sleep disturbance after TBI. So that is quite common. Some medications are commonly prescribed after TBI can cause drowsiness, cognitive slowing, and reduce energy levels, which can worsen fatigue symptoms. So examples of these could be like antidepressants, muscle relaxants, sedatives, like sleep aids, and pain medication. So just be aware of the side effects of the medications that you're taking. And then deconditioning. So individuals with TBI may become less active due to mobility limitations, pain, or fear of worsening symptoms. So this leads to muscle weakness and cardiovascular conditioning, making even those routine activities causing them to require more effort and energy. So those are some theories of why there's an issue with fatigue after TBI. Okay, so to kind of understand fatigue before brain injury, which is much different than fatigue that people experience after brain injury. So before your brain injury, you likely had enough energy to manage all of your emotional, cognitive, and physical needs for the day. And even when you got tired or stressed, you had a reserve of energy that you could tap into. So kind of think of this as like a backup battery pack for your phone. That's like an external battery that you could tap into if your phone battery was dying. But after your brain injury, all tasks likely require more energy than before the brain injury. Thus, there is less energy reserve available for daily tasks. So try to make more sense of it. Um, there's something called a fatigue battery that I use to help explain to patients kind of this difference of fatigue before and after a TBI. So we all have a limited amount of energy available for us to use each day. So I want you to try to imagine your energy level for the entire day as a battery. And you might want to think of it like the battery level on your phone. Okay, and I'm going to name this person Jack. So we'll take Jack, for instance. So let's say that Jack has never had a TBI. So he wakes up in the morning and his battery is full, 100%. In the afternoon, he uses some of his energy for mental activities, but he still has plenty of energy left, so like 85%. By the evening, a substantial part of his battery is used, but he still has some remaining, so like 60%. And then at night, he gets a good night's rest and his battery is fully recharged back to 100%. So this is normal, right? But let's say that Jack got into a bad motor vehicle accident and now he has a traumatic brain injury. So now when Jack wakes up in the morning, his battery is only partially filled. So he only starts out the day with like 60% battery. This is his maximum attainable level. In the afternoon, after a few mental activities, his battery is almost empty. So he has like 35%. And in the evening, or maybe even before that, his battery is pretty much empty. So like 5%. And then at night, his battery tries to recharge, but it can never fully recharge back to 100%. So that's what it's like after TBI. Your battery is never fully charged, it depletes quicker with activity, and it takes longer to recover and recharge. So hopefully that helps put things into perspective a little bit better. All right, we're kind of flying through pretty quick. So now we're going to talk about strategies. So how to help manage fatigue. All right. So first, you have to know which activities deplete your battery and which activities recharge your battery. So it can be helpful to keep a fatigue journal and write down your energy levels periodically throughout the day, as well as the activities that you've engaged in during the day to help identify any correlations. This can help you better understand what causes fatigue and what improves it, which will also allow you to make more informed choices about your schedule and your activities. So here are some examples of activities that might deplete your battery. So things like prolonged physical activity, prolonged mental effort, multitasking, stressful or overstimulating environments like grocery stores, crowds, concerts, things like that. Long social interactions or gatherings, emotional stress, and then lack of rest or poor sleep. Those are just some examples. There could be many others. And everybody's going to have, it's going to be different for everybody. So what depletes somebody's battery might not deplete somebody else's. Maybe we'll just say Jack and Jill. So let's say Jack, it takes like 2% of his battery when he takes a shower in the morning. So it uses like 2%. But then Jill, maybe it uses like 10% of her battery. So everybody's a little different. So you have to kind of figure out which activities deplete your battery and which ones recharge them. So here are some activities that might recharge your battery. These are just examples. So going for a short walk, like 10 to 15 minutes in a quiet area, stretching exercises, guided meditations, taking a bath or a warm shower, being outside in nature, low energy social engagement. So this would be like having tea with your friend, like a really close friend at home for 30 minutes. Taking breaks, taking a 20 to 30-minute power nap, which we will talk more about later as far as napping. There's something called progressive muscle relaxation, which is a technique where you tense a specific muscle group and then you slowly relax those muscles. So that can help. Yoga or Tai Chi, listening to audiobooks or podcasts, petting an animal. It's one of my favorite ones. So there's research that shows that I think it's like serotonin or something that releases whenever you pet animals. So if you don't have an animal, you can go volunteer at like an animal shelter maybe. Um, Listening to music and then engaging in a favorite hobby like painting or coloring or something like that. Okay. So another strategy is to structure your day. So once you know which activities deplete your battery and which activities recharge your battery, then you want to structure your day accordingly. So plan your activities wisely, plan your days so that you don't overdo it. Try to establish a regular routine with periods of activity interspersed with periods of rest. Consider your energy levels when planning your day and try to reserve energy for the most important tasks. So typically, when we go through the day, we have less energy at the end of the day than we did at the beginning of the day. So I always say you might want to try to do those tasks that you really have to prioritize and get done, or that require a lot more effort. Plan those for the beginning of the day when you have more energy. You can also use a timer. So setting a timer to remind you to take breaks. So for example, after 30 to 45 minutes of activity, whether it's physical or cognitive, take a break and rest for 10 to 15 minutes. This helps to just prevent that overexertion. So recognizing early warning signs. So you kind of have to know what your symptoms are. So when you start to feel fatigued. So after brain injury, many people try to return to the same level of activity. Wait, I'm not on the right one. Sorry. Warning signs. So pay attention to the early signs of fatigue. So it could be like irritability, difficulty concentrating, or physical exhaustion. So when you notice that you're having those symptoms, then you need to take a break or reduce activity before it becomes overwhelming. So, and you can also mark that down in your fatigue journal if you do one, kind of what those warning signs are. All right, now we're on pace yourself. So, after brain injury, many people try to return to the same levels of activity that were achieved prior to the brain injury. This leads to the vicious cycle of doing too much activity and then having to rest for like 3 days as a result. Um, So you want to kind of imagine the way that I like to explain it, and I heard it before, was that imagine you have, well, imagine somebody switch your car's fuel tank from a 12-gallon tank to an 8-gallon tank. There we go, 8 gallons. And they didn't tell you. Okay. So you'll have to learn that your tank is smaller and plan to stop and refuel more often. And it's not good to just keep pumping the gas and trying to keep going because there's nothing left in the tank. So don't try to keep pushing yourself. You need to kind of know your limits and when you need to stop and take a rest. All right. So building endurance. This is another strategy that is really important both physically and cognitively. So you want to start with small, manageable activities and slowly build up your activity level by increasing the complexity and duration of the activity. So, for example, if you're trying to do more physical activity and build your physical endurance, you'll start with like 5 minutes of walking and then gradually increase the time as your stamina improves. Maybe the next day you do 10 minutes. Maybe the next week you do like 15 minutes. Maybe the next day you try to go uphill a little bit. So you just kind of gradually start to increase that duration in that complexity. And then for cognitive tasks, same thing. Begin with short sessions of mental effort, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, and then increase as you feel more comfortable. It does take time to build up physical endurance and cognitive endurance after a brain injury. You kind of want to think of it like running a marathon, right? So I've never ran a marathon, but I've heard that it requires a lot of planning and training. You can't just go run 24 miles. You have to first start with a mile and then 3 miles, and you build up your endurance every week until the marathon. So it's the same thing. You can't just go back to doing everything that you were doing before and expect it's going to be okay. You really have to slowly build that endurance, which does take time. So you have to be patient with yourself and your body. All right. The next strategy is to break up tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks. So, for example, let's say that you're planning a family vacation to the lake this summer. So maybe one day you'll choose the date and duration and make sure that it works with everybody's schedule and calendars. And then maybe then you'll do another chunk, which is researching the lodging or campsite options. And then another chunk might just be like researching fun activities to do while you're there. And then another day, maybe you create the budget for the trip. So you're kind of breaking this big task of planning a family vacation into smaller, more manageable chunks, and then remembering to have breaks in between. And then try to focus on one task at a time. So multitasking can increase that cognitive load and lead to fatigue quicker. So do one thing at a time. All right. Another strategy is to say no. So don't be a people pleaser. Say no to excessive demands of others. Be assertive. Remember, put your health first. I often like to say that your health is your wealth. So make sure that you're putting that first. Delegate tasks when able. I know it's not always possible, but if there are people in your household, friends that you can ask to help with things, that it's not essential that you do them, then try to do that. All right. Another strategy is to have good relaxation strategies and sleep hygiene habits. So with napping, typically I don't recommend that people nap because then they have a hard time falling asleep. But a 15 to 30-minute power nap, it can be rejuvenating and help restore energy. So those are okay. But the long naps, you don't want to do long naps, especially kind of like later in the day, like around 3, 4 o'clock. Don't do any like long naps because that will interfere with your nighttime sleep, and that's just going to mess up things even more as far as sleep goes. Developing a bedtime routine. So establish like a pre-sleep routine of maybe dimming the lights, avoiding screens for an hour before bed, and then engaging in like relaxation techniques. One thing that, and Reggie might have touched on this on her sleep class. I unfortunately wasn't able to attend, so I don't know. This might all just be review. Um, but engaging in like a guided meditation. I do one that's like a body scan for sleep, where it kind of helps you go through each part of your body and relax those muscles. And that can be really relaxing and help me just fall asleep. And then keeping a consistent sleep schedule. So go to bed and wake up at the same time every day, which can improve the sleep quality and reduce that daytime fatigue. Okay. And that's it. So that's my contact information, my references, and yeah, so we'll do question and answer since we have plenty of time.
We do. I'm just going to hop in before we start that and thank you for this wonderful presentation. Um, before I push pause on the recording for question and answer, I just wanted to say that so much of the information that you shared in this presentation is beneficial for people that are brain injury survivors, but also for providers and for family members and friends. So I just want to remind everyone that this recording will be up on our website, and I really encourage you to guide your practitioners, guide your friends or family to go and watch it, because this is important information. And you know, as people with lived experience, you do not need to be the only educators for the people around you. But I feel like helping people also have a better understanding of what your fatigue experience may be like can be really helpful for your communication and relationships in explaining yourself. But thank you so much, Miranda, also for reminding people to have to give themselves permission to be in a place of growth and discovery as they're relearning how to address fatigue and to be patient with ourselves, you know, as we're learning new ways to manage our energy level. So I'm going to turn off the recording and we'll go to question and answers. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Let me see here. Bear with me.